All right, so welcome to part two of the great D's, great debates, great decisions, great deciders of the Mussar movement. Last week, we had an introduction to the Mussar movement and really spent our time focusing on Rabbi Yisrael Lipkin. Rabbi Yisrael Lipkin lived from 1810 to 1883, better known as Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And he had this revolutionary idea, which doesn't seem so revolutionary today, but then it was quite revolutionary, to have everyone, not just yeshiva bachers, but really every single person who is concerned about their relationship with Hashem and their relationship with other people, to take time and create a methodological system in order to better yourself of character development, character perfection, and the like. We spoke about how he had three main students that really were the progenitors of the Mussar movement, that really took the Mussar movement and ran with it. That was the Simcha Zissel Ziv, better known as the Alter of Kelm, which we'll get back to in a moment. Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer, Rabbi Yitzchak Petersburg, Rabbi Yitzchak Petersburg. Also, we're going to reference again and the fact that he was a major Talmud Chacham, aside for being a Mussar master, aside for being someone who mastered the art of self-perfection, and Rav Naftali Amsterdam. These are the three major students of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. The three of them, headed by Rav Simcha Zissel Ziv, they started the Beis HaMussar, and really were the progenitors, were the ones that continued on this legacy of the importance of dedicating yourself to character refinement, and really made the movement established in yeshivas. Rav Simcha Zissel Ziv, so the Alter of Kelm, who was the oldest of the three students of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, he passed away in 1898. So he must have been born in I think within the first quarter of the 19th century, toward the end of the first quarter of the 19th century, maybe 1830. The Alter of Kelm was born. So he lived into his 70s, and he really was the leader of the pack. He was the leader of this continuation of the Mussar movement, and he had two main students. His two main students were Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the Alter of Slobodka. The Alter of Slobodka, he was the mashkiach of the Slobodka Yeshiva's Knesset Yisrael, and Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel was named the Yeshiva Knesset Yisrael after Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And the second main student of the Alter of Kelm, I'm moving a little quickly because we have a lot to do. The second student of the Alter of Kelm was Rav Yosef Horowitz, known as the Alter of Navardik. Now, last time we spoke about how Rav Yitzchak Blazer, the pre-Yitzchak Rav Itzla Petersburg, not just was a Mussar master, but also was an immense Talmud Chacham. So when there were those that complained to Rav Yisrael Salanter, if you recall the story, they said, why would you have the pre-Yitzchak, Rabbi Itzla Petersburg, spend so much time studying Mussar and preaching Mussar? If he spent all that time learning Torah, can you imagine the gadol he would have become, right? If he was already great with the scaled back schedule in learning Gemara and Talmud and Mishnah and Halacha, that was already a scaled back schedule because of the fact that he was spending so much time on Mussar. Imagine if he carved out all that time towards putting all of his energy into Talmud. He would have become the greatest genius, the greatest Talmud Chacham of all time. So why would you take him away? And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter famously responded with a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that if you have a choice between making hamotzi on two pieces of bread, either a small little challah roll, a small little roll, or a big, beautiful, huge chassan challah thing, big, beautiful bar mitzvah challah, But there's a slice missing from it. There's a piece from the end cut off from it. So which did you make a bracha on? Either the whole mini challah roll or this big gigantic one. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, you should make a bracha on the shalem, and the shalem is better than the gadol. So shleimus is better than godless, having a complete, a full, worked out character that you're not just a big Talmud Chacham, but you also have proper midos, and you also know how to be a good neighbor, and you also know how to be a good citizen, and you also know how to connect with God, and you are a shalem person, you're a complete person. That is much better. Even if you're going to compromise on your godless, on your greatness, it's better to be shalem than it is to be a gadol. Now, how do you achieve shlemus? So, just like most things in life, there are multiple avenues you can go down to accomplish a certain goal, right? No matter what party you're associated with, everyone wants America to be a successful place, and everyone wants America to be a place that is a model for the rest of the world, to have a strong economy, and to have a place of that pursues liberty and happiness. And so, but there are multiple opinions on how you achieve such a goal, how to create America into a place that is shalem. There are multiple ways to do it, and multiple opinions as to which is the best way to do it. So to achieve shleimus as a person, of course, there are multiple avenues to go down. So the Alter of Kelm, his two students, the Alter of Slobodka and the Alter of Nevardik, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel and Rabbi Yosef Horowitz, had two vastly different approaches to how to achieve shleimus, how to achieve character perfection. Let's start with the Alter of Nevardik, and I'm going to share my screen so we can know who we're talking about over here. This is the Alter of Nevardik, okay? You could even just tell from his countenance that he's a very serious person. The Alter of Nevardik, Rabbi Yosef Horowitz. So his perspective on the way to achieve shleimus was shvelus ha'adam, shiflus ha'adam, shiflus ha'adam. Shiflus ha'adam means, technically speaking, it translates to degradation of a person, which sounds pretty bad. And when you hear about the things that they used to do, you're going to walk away thinking that he was absolutely out of his mind. But this was a real, legitimate school to Mussar, to character perfection. What's shiflus ha'adam? The Alter Nevardik felt that in order for a person to achieve proper humility, which is the core ingredient to having emunah, having complete faith in God, which is the ultimate ingredient to having shleimus. So a person needs to view themselves as they are nothing. That, as you know, we say that that a person is ka'afar ha'adama, that a person is like the dust of the earth, but they're nothing. They're so small that we think we're so big, we think we're so entitled. But a person needs to recognize that in reality, I'm a nothing. And the more you recognize that you're a nothing, the more humility you'll have. And the more humility you'll have, then in turn, you'll have more faith in the fact that there's a higher power, Hashem, the fact that you will be a nicer person because you won't feel entitled for anything, and you'll feel that you only need to give to others. The more you put yourself down, the more room there is to bring other people up. This is what his perspective was. And in fact, he would instruct his students to live a life of shiflus, that they would do exercises in literally human degradation. They would sit on the floor. They would purposely not lie, go to sleep in comfortable places. They would take these extremely long walks in order to cause pain to themselves. It's mind-blowing to when you read the history books as to the different exercises they did in the Navardic yeshiva, it's hard to imagine that this was an approach that was accepted, but this was one of the legitimate approaches to Mussar. Obviously, the approach of the Alter of Navardic did not take off, and the one that was accepted more was that of the Alter of Slobodka. And really, all yeshivas that have adopted Mussar in their yeshiva really have taken the approach of the Alter of Slobodka. Maybe not to the extreme that he took it, however, his approach nonetheless. What was the approach of the Alter of Slobodka, or Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel? So this is Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, the Alter of Slobodka on the right. To his left is his Rebbitzin. This is actually on their voyage as they were moving from the Mir to Eretz Yisrael, where he was going to run the Chevron Yeshiva. So this was taken in the early 1920s. So the Alter of Slobodka had the approach of Nosson Tzvi Finkel's approach was that a person cannot view themselves as shiftless, of that I'm lacking, but rather godless ha'adam, the greatness of a person. That the more potential you see in yourself, the more you recognize just how great I am. So then that is how you ultimately achieve shleimus. That's how you ultimately connect with God, because you recognize that, wow, Hashem put me on this world for a purpose. Bishvili nivra olam, the world was created for me. Hashem is expecting so much of me because of how great I am. And therefore, that is going to motivate you to grow to greater heights. So it's mamish, it's polar opposites. It's North Pole and the North Pole and the South Pole. These are completely separate, completely opposite extremes to human perfection. One either looking at a person as being like nothing, like the dust of the earth, or looking at a person as they are the greatest in the world. And that these two approaches are the ways to achieve greatness. In fact, there are the certain things that Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel used to demand of his students. Things like the way that they would present themselves, that it was always with a buttoned tie. That if you see pictures of students from Yeshiva of Slobodka or the Mir Yeshiva. In fact, let me pull up a picture right now. This is let me see if I could pull up this picture of students from the Mir Yeshiva. I don't have that picture with me right now, but Brian Marcus recently showed me pictures of his uncle, who was a student in the Mir Yeshiva, which was an offshoot of the Slobodka Yeshiva. And you see in the picture that the boys dressed in a regal fashion, suit and tie, hat pressed, clean, shoes polished, like the army, right? What do you mean? You're an Adam. You need to dress like an Adam. You know, one of the students of the Alter Slobodka was Rav Moshe Lesson. Rav Moshe Lesson was the mashkiach. He was the spiritual guide for Yeshiva University until he passed away. I believe he passed away in 74. So Rav Moshe Lesson, who my Rebbeim were students of his. So I hear from my Rebbeim that Rav Moshe Lesson, who was a student, a direct student of the Alter Slobodka, when he would walk through the streets in Washington Heights, which Washington Heights is now, it's a little bit better, but certainly back then it was not a pretty place to live. The way that people treated them, their own self-respect was not with a lot of respect. But when he would walk through the street, people would stop in their place. They'd move. It would be like Kriyas Yamsov. Talking about like locals living in Washington Heights, people that were of a low socioeconomic standard, people that would, you have drug dealers, you have people they would stand up for him, because when he would walk down the street in his suit and tie, polished shoes, hat straight, and he would greet people no matter what you looked like. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you, ma'am. In that kind of a regal fashion, you took the person seriously. The tenants that his neighbors that lived in the same building as him in Washington Heights on 400 what is it? building 485 West 186th Street. It was the building right next to, 2 blocks over from where Brooke and I's first, mine and Brooke's first apartment was. So this is where Rav Moshe Lesson lived. In the building with him lived these same kind of folks. But after he passed away, these folks used to come to the yeshiva, to Yeshiva University, and say that you don't understand, the rabbi was a prince. He was a prince. I lived in the same building as a prince. Because the Alter Sabaka used to teach this and actually ingrain it into his students' minds, that there's a godless ha'adam, there's a greatness to human beings, and therefore you need to present yourself as such. So these were two extremes, and I mean extremes. And it was very hard to live to either standard. Obviously, we know that the standard that the author of Navardik was asking his students to live by, which was one really where you are degrading yourself to the point where you have the default is humility, right? That could break a person. It could cause a person to become depressed, to feel as though they're not worth anything. And then if you take the approach of the Alter of Slobodka, of Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, so you run the risk of a person feeling deflated over the fact that they are not able to achieve their potential, that it's too high of a goal, it's too much of an expectation. So this was a big problem. And in fact, this caused a lot of opposition, which next week we'll get to the great debate of the Mussar movement, the opposition to the Mussar movement, which we'll get to next week. But this caused a lot of opposition to the Mussar movement, that people such as the Chazon Ish felt as though there's no place for Mussar in a proper Torah environment because it's dangerous. That was true until this holy tzaddik came onto the scene. And this is Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz was a student of the Alter of Slobodka. Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz took the Mussar movement and made it something that was approachable by all of Klal Yisrael. And it really is a thanks to Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, which we'll speak about next week, exactly what he did in order to make the Mussar movement something that was accepted by everyone. But that's what Rav Soloveitchik said. Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University, Chief Rabbi of Boston, said that all the opposition to the Mussar movement stopped with Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. And we have on the call with us Brian Marcus, our esteemed president, whose uncle was a student of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, learning in the Mir Yeshiva. So we're going to show a few pictures tonight from Brian's uncle, who was a student of Rabbi Yeruchem. We'll get to those soon. Just a little bit of a bio as to Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz lived from 1873 to 1936. He was the mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva. Now you have to understand, until the Mir Yeshiva came onto the scene and really was the yeshiva that after the war was the conduit for so many other yeshivas, either in Eretz Yisrael or in the United States. The Mir Yeshiva, which now its existence is more than 200 years, but it became like a completely new yeshiva when Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz came in as the mashgiach. At the time, the Rosh Yeshiva was Rabbi Lezer Yudel Finkel, and Rabbi Lezer Yudel Finkel felt that in order for the yeshiva to be successful, the emphasis needs to be on the boy's character development. The emphasis cannot be on who's the greatest genius, because in the yeshiva of Mir, which was, where students went after learning in Slobodka, students from Panovich, literally the best students from all over Europe would come to learn in the Mir Yeshiva. So you have sitting in the room of 400 students in the base medrash, you have 400 geniuses, right? Like the phone is still ringing for the second best guy in the Mir Yeshiva. Everyone was the best guy. Everyone was the top student, right? So trying to achieve greatness in learning, that was almost like a given in the Mir. What wasn't a given in the Mir was whether or not students were going to walk away with pristine character. Students were going to walk away feeling confident, not just in their Torah knowledge, but their Torah practice. not just in what they know, but how they live. And when Rav Yehuda Finkel hired the mashgiach, Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, the emphasis of the yeshiva, the one who really where the focus was on Mussar and Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz passed away in 1936. This is a picture that Brian has shared with me. It's an unbelievable picture. This was a holiday card that was sent from the Mir Yeshiva exactly 94 years ago. 94 years ago, sent by the 90 Tzadi Ches. No, I'm sorry, Tuf Reish Tzadi Ches, and right now we're in Tuf Shin Pei Aleph. So we're in 5781, and this was in 5698, the year 5698. This was a holiday card. It says Lashana Tova Tichasvu v'Sichasmu. It's from the Menahale, from the administrators of HaYeshiva, the Mir Yeshiva. On the right, you see Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. The Rosh Yeshiva is Rabbi Yehuda Finkel over here on the left, and in the middle was the Rabbi. He was also Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, the Manal of the Mir Yeshiva, and also one of the pulpit rabbis in the town of Mir, Reb Elio Baruch Kamai. And this was the dream team. This was it's really a thanks to them that we have Torah in Israel today, the way that it grew in Israel today, in the United States. It was really a thanks to this dream team, and at the helm of it was Rav Yeruchem Levovitz. You have to listen to this short video clip from Rav Gershon Yankelovich. Rav Gershon Yankelovich was a student of the Mir Yeshiva. He was a close student of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, where most of the students there felt that they were a close student of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz because he had a way with the students. He had a way of creating Mussar into something that was very subjective, that what's best for you? What do you need to work on right now? And he would guide the students in the way that they would develop themselves. The first time I met Rav Gershon Yankelovich, and I saw him and met him a few times. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva University, but he was a student of the Chafetz Chaim. He was a student of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. I mean, seeing him was an experience in and of itself, because I've spoken to someone who learned Torah with the Chafetz Chaim. I've spoken to someone who got direct guidance from Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. It was an awe-inspiring thing just having a relationship with him. And he had a Chumash year. The Chumash year was every Thursday, where he would teach students in YU this book called Das Torah. This is the sefer that was written by the mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva, Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. Listen to the way that he describes what describes Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz and the Chafetz Chaim.
Before I came to Mir,
can you hear it?
I was in Hagen.
Can you hear it?
I was by the Levi from Chafetz Chaim. The whole world came. The Spedim, Mir Mashiach, made a hesped. The next,
when he says Mashgiach, he's referring to Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. So what he's saying right now, he just described the Levaya of the Chafetz Chaim, that he was at the Levaya of the Chafetz Chaim. The whole world came, and the Mashgiach, Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, gave a hesped the next day. Listen to this.
day, and he made wet more than one handkerchief. He didn't stop crying.
When Yeruchem Levovitz was giving his hesped for the Chafetz Chaim, he used up more than one handkerchief, not tissue, more than one handkerchief, because he wouldn't stop crying. These were people that understood life, that it was not, they of course were people that had agendas. Of course, they had personal agendas, but those were minor details. Today, there's so much emphasis put on the bigger agendas. For these Gedolei Yisrael, for the Chafetz Chaim, for Yeruchem Levovitz, it was Torah. This is actually a picture that also from Brian's uncle, from the Levaya of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. You see, just look at the way that everyone is dressed there, that people really are regal. They came dressed in fine attire, even to a sad occasion like this. It was outdoor in Mir. This is a picture from the Levaya of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz. After Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz passed away, so after this point, so the Mir was stuck without their main star. They were stuck without their guide. That everything that Reb Leizer Yudel, the Rosh Yeshiva, everything Reb Leizer Yudel had placed an emphasis on in order to change the direction of the yeshiva to one that was geared towards character development, was now there was an empty void there. So where was this void going to be filled? So Reb Leizer Yudel did research, and there was one other individual like Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz that had lived in Europe, but already made Aliyah, already was living in Israel. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Petach Tikva, and then was called up by Rabbi Leizer Yudel, not called up, but was sent a message by Rabbi Leizer Yudel that we need you to come to Mir, we need you to be the Mashgiach. And that was Rabbi Chaskel Levinson. This on the right is the passport picture of Rabbi Chaskel Levinson. On the left, this is the passport picture of the Panovich Rav of Rav Shlomo Kahneman. And Rabbi Chaskel Levinson was known as an angel. He was mamish known as an angel in his nature. It was much softer. And like Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, he made Mussar something that was palpable. It was something that was subjective. It was something that a person could actually take upon themselves. It was slow steps into growing into greatness, into character development. In fact, the students of the Mir Yeshiva referred to this transition. They related it to a mashal of Bayis Rishon versus Bayis Sheni, the first temple to the second temple. That Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz was the first temple. It was our first exposure to really experiencing the Shekhinah. Then, when there was a Churban Habayis, when Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz passed away and the temple was destroyed, it was built with Rabbi Chaskel as the Mashgiach.
You might have something to add.
As the Mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva. Brian, what was that? As the Mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva as the Bayis Sheni, as the second go at having that kind of a close relationship with Hashem, experiencing the Shekhinah. So this is the Mussar movement and how the Mussar movement really took off, because then after Rabbi Chaskel and after the yeshiva went through Japan and Shanghai in order to save the yeshiva and that whole wild excursion, and then they ended up in Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Chaskel followed the yeshiva with them. They all stuck together. The yeshiva really blossomed and grew, and sticking with the Finkel family. Rabbi Leizer Yudel, after he was passed away, so then his son Rav Banish Finkel took over as Rosh Yeshiva. Then after Rav Banish, then his son-in-law Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who's named for the Alter of Slobodka, took over. And in the same model of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz and Rabbi Chaskel Levinson, the Mir Yeshiva blossomed and blossomed and blossomed, and now there's 8,000 students learning in the Mir Yeshiva. That really, when you walk in, the way that the students in the Mir Yeshiva greet you, it's an unbelievable thing. It's like every guy that's there is just a good guy. Because there's such an emphasis on having proper character development. But then Rabbi Chaskel Levinson passed away, so there was a Churban Bayis Sheni. So who is Bayis Shlishi? who is going to be the one that takes us through the finish line, the one who began the process of building the third temple. So this, I'd like to suggest, the one that there was, again, Rabbi Saul Salanter, he was the revolutionary mind behind the importance of character development. There was some massaging that needed to happen in how it developed, the best way to do it, the best path to go down. Then that in turn became Alter Slobodka, Alter Navardik, two completely different approaches. Then going to Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz, Rabbi Chatzel Levinson. But now, how do we learn Mussar today? How do we approach character development today? What is the best? What is the thing we have to be focusing on today? So this was really established and modernized. What I'd say, the one who modernized the Mussar movement was Reb Shlomo Wolbe. Reb Shlomo Wolbe modernized the Mussar movement. This is Reb Wolbe. And he wrote a sefer called the Ale Shore, if you could see in the picture, the Ale Shore, which I'd like to read to you just the opening line, the introduction to the Ale Shore. He writes the following: Berachovos Atuna, in the streets of Athens, Tayal Adam, a person can travel. Atar kol ezrach shepigish v'shalo kol echad as oso sheila, and you ask anyone in Athens the following question: Ketzad lechios, what's the best way to live? Sheila zos hemshich lishol kol yemei chayav, that a person living in Athens can walk around their whole life asking themselves this question. As kol sheba ito b'maga, that whoever you interact with, these questions were being asked. And it was asked by all of these great philosophers. Says Rav Wolbe, Zeh Haisa Ba'atuna. This was in Athens. Sham Shalu Ketzad Lechios. There they're asking how to live. Sham Chasu B'neiros Ben Adam. They're trying to figure out what is a proper person. However, in Yerushalayim, Lo Hitzrichu Lishol. Such questions don't need to be asked. Such questions, you don't need to ponder. You don't need to wonder what's the best way. We know what's the best way to live, by following the Torah. And Rav Shlomo Wolbe spent his whole life, since he recognized this, in order to guide people towards the Torah. You know, Rav Wolbe actually did not grow up in a religious home. Rav Wolbe, when he was, I think, 17 years old, went to go study in university in Germany. Went to study in university in Germany. And while he was there, he was learning philosophy. He was learning from these philosophers, these Greek philosophers. And he came to recognize, he said, you know, he was obviously a very, very smart person, and things weren't adding up. But he recognized that there must be a higher purpose in life. So he knew he was Jewish. He grew up in a Jewish home, just not a religious home. So he decided that he was going to start learning Torah. He left yeshiva, he went to the Hildesheimer Seminary, and he went to go learn Torah. And he engaged in the study of Mussar, and he engaged in the writings of Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz and Rabbi Chatzel Levinson. And Rav Wolbe became the person who modernized the Mussar movement by bringing other people to try and ask themselves the same question of how can I be the best person I could be through the Torah. Listen to, this is an amazing clip I came across a few years ago. It's an amazing clip of Rav Wolbe in describing what our main focus needs to be. Like I said before, Rav Wolbe, I think, really was the one that opened up the path to eventually the rebuilding of the third temple. So why hasn't Mashiach come yet? This is exactly what Rav Wolbe is trying to help us understand.
בפרט בלי תורה, צריכים להתקרב, לעסוק בקירוב.
אדם צריך לתת מעשה מהזמן של הכלל ישראל.
So this is a critical question. The question is, they asked Rav Wolbe, but okay, shkayach, you need to do kiruv, you need to help people understand that they need to focus their energy to coming closer with Hashem, to character development, and like everything we've spoken about. So now Rav Wolbe is saying to take it a step further, not just focus on yourself, but let's help other people accomplish the same goal. Okay, shkayach Rav Wolbe, now how do you do it? How do you help people recognize this?
כל אדם שמקיים מצוות יכול משהו להגיד. הוא לא צריך להגיד דברים גדולים. אבל אדם שיש לו בית ושומר שבת והילדים שלו גדלים כילדים דתיים, הוא יכול לדבר עם כל אדם כמה טוב זה חיים של תורה. אם הוא בא ומדבר עם אנשים כמה טוב זה לשמור מצוות יהודי טוב, זה לא יפריע לו. להפך, הוא יתחזק מזה. באמת, החרדי ישפיע גם כן על הדלת השני.
According to Rav Wolbe, it's all about just exuding the love of living a Torah lifestyle. That's it. That's all it comes down to. Just want to be able to exude that kind of love of a Torah lifestyle. That's all Mussar. That's all character development. It's all of it. That it's just living that kind of a life. I just want to close by re-emphasizing the fact that today there's no such thing as a controversy as to whether or not Mussar is the right thing. What's the right approach to Mussar? Today, that such disagreements don't exist. Well, we're going to talk about exactly what the issues were, and you know who was on the the two sides of the aisle. But today it doesn't exist, because today Rav Wolbe modernized Mussar. He said, no, it's just about finding beauty in Torah. And when you find the beauty in Torah and you find a beauty in Torah lifestyle and you live that way, so then that energy permeates to the other people you interact with, and other people end up coming closer. And then eventually that is what is going to bring Bayis Shlishi. So this is the Mussar movement. Last week we spoke about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. This week we speak about Rabbi Yeruchem Levovitz and Rabbi Chatzel Levinson and Rav Wolbe. This is the Mussar movement, and without the Mussar movement, I don't know where the Torah world would be today, where Orthodoxy would be today. But we have a great debt of gratitude to these Gedolei Yisrael. And next week we'll speak about going back to the origins of the Mussar movement and some of the opposition that existed then. We're going to usually I have a couple minutes to hang on for questions, but the women's event is starting in just a minute. I want to give everyone time to get on there. All right, thank you everyone for coming.